This evening we're going to be joined by broadcaster and beauty journalist Madeleine Spencer, and we're going to be talking about common hair mistakes.
Hi.
Hi Madeleine, good evening.
Lovely to see you.
I've given a short intro to the early joiners. Hair mistakes, common ones that we come across.
Yep.
And over to you.
Yeah, so I'm pretty excited about this. Last week we covered hair myths, and today we're doing the mistakes. So I feel like we're going to go in with 5 common mistakes that also I think would be great if you could explain why they're mistakes and what you can do if you've made those mistakes. Because I think looking at these, I think all of us will have made these mistakes. So should we go straight in?
Please do.
Okay. Number 1, colour.
Colour's an area where I think there are lots of mistakes. Certainly there's 3 or 4 that I could talk about. Perhaps first we set the scene for perhaps a new client coming into the salon to see us. We will sit down together, go through a consultation with one of our expert colourists. And we want to find out more about not just the person's hair, their lifestyle, what particular events may be coming up. But the general thrust is to give someone the highest possible benefit impact at the lowest cost. And when I talk about benefit, it's the best looking colour, which will last the longest. And the cost will be the cost in time, money and health impact to the hair. And generally people want to have the best they can get with less fuss.
Yeah.
So common things that we will come across, I think start with a lack of colour strategy from the person doing the colour. And it's very easy to want to do the biggest bling today without any consideration for the impact on the hair next time. And we see that a lot, and unnecessary over-colouring of the hair. So that will be perhaps, someone may have sort of warm or darker hair. They might want to have some lights put through, so varying shades of lights. And we've seen where perhaps they've had their hair coloured all over 100% and then lights put through, whereas actually the base colour of their hair was a perfectly good contrast for those lights. So they could have perhaps had 70% of their hair coloured, and, or even 30%, and left more natural hair, which would have a big impact on condition and also how well the colour lasts.
Okay, so if someone has over-coloured their hair because they've gone in and they've said, hey, I want really strong highlights, I want it to feel summery, like let's have it, and someone's done that, how do you come back from that? Is there a way to do that once it's been coloured?
Well, if it's being coloured with highlights, that's generally technically meaning it's bleach on the hair. Most technicians will use the term low lights to mean anything using tint, although that tint could be a very light shade of blonde, but it's a tint colour, it's not pure bleach. If hair is bleached, it's actually taken all of the natural colour away from the hair, out of the hair, so that's gone. So yes, you can go back by putting further tint back in, but you can't get the natural pigment back until fresh hair comes through.
Right.
So
okay.
The difference is that a tint is putting colour into the hair and a bleach is taking colour out.
So once the colour's stripped out, it's a done job, right? You can't.
So you may go from dark, and people that are having their hair bleached, if they have dark hair bleached, they will go through phases of brown to red to orange to golden, and if they keep pushing, they will get to those more ashy blondes. But some hair won't go that far.
It won't go that far without breaking, or it won't go that far full stop?
Well, it can be very difficult to take. If someone has naturally jet black hair, it can be difficult to get a pure white blonde, a pure platinum blonde, to remove all of the redness from the hair. Right.
Okay. And you mentioned that there were, I think it was four things in colour. What were the other ones?
I think in terms of over-colouring also, not just putting colour over coloured hair too many times, but also when maintaining a colour like highlights or a tint and doing the roots and just unnecessarily overlapping hair or going over the ends of hair again, which is not necessary. And it just means that the hair's being coloured too many times.
So in your view, a colorist should be thinking as much about the future of your hair and the health of your hair and your overall where you're going with it, as much as they are about that instant impact when you leave the salon.
Very, very much so. There's a balance of judgment to be made with every consultation, and for every client it's different. It's very personalized, and it's different at different times of their lives, because it may be that they're on the red carpet tonight, or they have a wedding in two months' time. And so the balance of judgment is going to be much more about the effect, the big effect of that particular day, and less about that it takes much longer to do, or that it will have a slightly more adverse impact on the hair health.
Yeah.
So it's a judgment every time, and that's important that those judgments are made, and the colorists aren't just robotic in their application on hair.
And what about toner? That's a big thing at the moment, and everyone's sort of gone a bit mad for toner. What do you think about that?
Yeah, toner is the latest incarnation. It's a nice, easy word to say. It sounds quite innocuous.
Yeah.
Just, let's have a toner. Essentially, these are a second color process to adjust or perfect the shade at the end of the first color process. And in the early days, these would have been either a water rinse or a vegetable color, and occasionally a weak tint.
Yeah.
And I will say that if you want to lighten the hair, you have no choice but to use a weak tint, something that has peroxide in. A vegetable color and a water rinse will tone something slightly warmer or darker, but it won't lift color.
Yeah.
So, but what seems to have happened is that a lot of colorists rely on weak tints now as a toner to bathe the hair at the end of their first process, and a lot of the time it's unnecessary, and it's over tinting the hair, and I think it's a little bit of a cover for not being as precise with color choice or application on the first round of color, because we can always just put a toner at the end, but
blur it basically.
It's not a great strategy unless you need to use that sort of toner.
I want to talk to you about two hair colors specifically within this. The first being blondes, and there is that addictive quality to having highlights. I know as someone who's had highlights to make her hair blonde, where you have one lot of highlights and it just doesn't, you want it to pop more, so you go back and you have more, and then you go back and you have more, and then suddenly your hair starts to look like a kind of blur of blondes, and you're not getting that exciting, flashy, shimmery thing that you were first going for. What can you do there? What's the answer?
Well, it's a great question, because it's a very common problem, and I guess it's a little bit like crack cocaine, apparently. Fantastic first time, bright, and gives you a great emotional high, but it never seems to quite reach it the next time. And what people need to understand is that when it comes to blonde, very often less is more, and that too much blonde in the hair will have a flattening effect, because it lacks the contrast of darker tones from which they can look more brilliant.
Yeah.
And so often it's a case of restoring contrast between those blonde flashes to actually make them look brighter. Unfortunately, if someone's had far too much highlighting, and we go back to colorists that just re-highlight through all of the hair, so that you end up with a highlighted effect on the roots, but actually it's a full tint on the end. And you'll have colorists say, well, we'll just put some reverse lights in, so we'll put some brown lights through those. And it's true that you can do that, and it may last for a couple of weeks, because once hair's been tinted that much, it's very porous, and whilst you can get the effect, it's very temporary, because the brown will wash out very quickly, and then you're back with a sludgy colour over the whole lot. It's not contrasted, but then neither is it bright blonde anymore.
You're making me think of a time when I was 18 and I dyed, my hair was white blonde, and then I dyed it black myself. Then I went to Australia on holiday and the light in the ocean made it green. And then I had to go into a salon and I was literally there for maybe 12 hours while they tinted and dyed and tinted and dyed and got it to like a normal color. But it took I had to grow it out before it got normal again, basically.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's great that you've had that experience, and you know, at 18, it's fine.
Yeah.
But, you know, you understand that you can't go black, blonde, red, blue, green, and expect the hair to just keep responding to the next shade.
So anyone who's watching who is in that situation where they've over highlighted their hair, it doesn't have that flashy, lovely effect anymore. What can you do at that stage? You think adding in darker colors and then letting some bits lie out for contrast?
Again, you know, if you had a big event and it was really important that the color was absolutely spot on for that, and we can delay our long-term strategy, then you know it can work to put dark lights through, but it's not an effective long-term strategy.
Right.
It will be sludgy in 3 weeks' time, and you will have just tinted the hair again.
Right.
You know, the best way is to actually give it time and make sure that each time the roots are done, very little of the highlighting is taken through to the ends, maybe a few, but just very, very little, just a little bit of blend. And then also, if you're going back to the same technician, they really should be able to follow their weave so that they're not creating yet another weave. They're following the pieces they did last time and leaving out the same pieces of natural virgin hair.
Which brings me to the next color I want to talk to you about, virgin hair. So this idea of this hair that's amazing quality, or, you know, hopefully very good quality, that naturally grows out of your head. But, and we were talking about this before we came on, we were saying it can look quite, you said it can look quite boring, right? Like, I mean, if you've...
I think it can.
Yeah, I mean, I know that mine certainly does. I have naturally quite thick hair and lots of it, but it all being the same color looks quite flat and dull. So do you reckon then, if you want your natural color, but you want it to, I want to say glow, maybe I mean twinkle, how do you do that without doing too much damage if you're someone who is just hardcore, wants their own hair color, but just wants to give it something?
Well, there are vegetable colors that are very effective. They won't lighten the hair, but they will make it richer, tone it either way, slightly darker, but certainly give it a lot more depth and gloss. But they could be used with a combination of a few highlights, a few lowlights, maybe around the face to give lift. It doesn't mean you have to colour 100% of your hair. And I think this is where so many people go wrong. You know, I love colouring hair. I'm not a colourist myself. We have expert technicians, but I love doing things to hair. But it's about balancing the result with the cost. For most people, you don't need to colour 100% of their hair to get an amazing effect.
And then when we're on colour, can I ask you about correcting at home, say greys or things like that? Do you think that's a crazy thing to do, or do you think that's something that you would encourage people to do if they do it well or with advice from their colorist?
I think if they do it well and they know what they're doing, they're using professional quality color, I don't think it's a problem. And I think less is more. You know, go easy. You know, we will have clients that have started with some white hairs. You know, for most of them, we don't try to obliterate every white hair. You know, it's carefully taking out the ones that we feel we need to, and letting the rest be natural, or adding in a few other tones to disguise the white, so it's not white against dark. You know, add a few other tones in, and actually the white isn't seen. There are lots of different ways to approach white hair.
Okay, but effectively the takeaway I'm getting from this is that with color, it is worth being sort of cautious and thinking of your long-term strategy versus trying to get the quick result.
It's thinking it through and being with a colorist that also has the same mind. I think, yes, one of the great fashions at the moment is balayage.
Yes.
And it's a fantastic technique. It means sort of freehand sweeping of the hair. It is a brilliant technique to get some amazing effects, but unfortunately, under this sexy French name, balayage, it's given rise to a lot of less able colorists to run amok with hair. over colouring the hair, overlapping. And we see this with clients coming into the first time for colour correction. We see it on social media. There's some really quite shocking work going on under the guise of balayage.
Yeah, it's not a catch-all, is it, for like great hair equals?
No,
yeah.
It does remind me a little bit of it's become like a fashion name, and it reminds me a little bit about perms. In the late 70s and early 80s. And we would have whole families of clients come in, daughter, mother, grandmother. They wanted a perm. And you could say to one of them, but you've actually got wavy hair, you don't need a perm. I want a perm. It was like they wanted a perm. They had to have a perm because that was the fashion. I had to have a perm. And so they would end up with hair that actually wasn't as nice as their own hair, but they were happy because they had a perm. We try to, I think we're more persuasive these days in guiding people into what's best.
Yeah, it calls to mind seeing really like young women with gorgeous skin put on loads of foundation because it's fashionable, and it's like, you don't necessarily need it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right, let's move to hair mistake number 2, which is cut. What do you mean by this?
Well, hair mistakes, it could be hair mistakes that have been done to you, or hair mistakes that you might be doing yourself in lockdown.
Yes.
I'm sure many people have discovered that kitchen scissors don't cut hair very well. They tend to slip because hair is very tough. But I'd say in the general hairdressing arena, there's been a sad decline in the ability of hairdressers to layer hair. And I think this started 20, 30 years ago.
Right.
With the advent of flat irons and those very, very straight looks. It encouraged hairdressers to just do one-length haircuts. One-length haircuts, often A-line, and by A-line I mean shorter at the back, longer at the front. And as time went on, all haircuts seemed to become a version of an A-line bob, which was something designed in the 60s for above the shoulder or just touching the shoulder looks. And now it's going to all sorts of lengths, one length, very quick, easy haircuts. If a client wants layers, they end up with a step halfway up or another one up here. And then they may have that chopped into to disguise the tier. And it's sad that I see that as the most common mistake. One length A-line haircuts inappropriately used.
Right. Can I ask you about layers? Because so I have 2 layer fears, which is why I've sort of always, whenever someone says to me layers, I kind of go, okay, one sec, and it takes me a while to get my head around it. The first being that I went and had a haircut, I think when I was about 13, and I had exactly as you've said, a step. So here was, one bit was up to here and the rest of it was down to here. And it was just, I had to straighten it / disguise that half. And then the other one is the Rachel haircut, which looked great on Jennifer Aniston, but I think looked awful on basically everyone else. And it's like all of those layers absolutely everywhere. And I remember that there was a time when you couldn't go to a hairdresser and have anything but a version of that, right? It was all anyone wanted. And I wonder to you, what are good layers today? Like what are the benefits of having your hair layered versus having it, as you said, just chopped across the bottom?
It's such an interesting question because it shows the misunderstandings around layering that is widespread. And people associate layering with a chunk missing out of their hair because that's what they've experienced before, or a version of Rod Stewart at the back. So I don't want layers. I have to say, I can't remember the last haircut that I did that had no layers whatsoever.
Okay.
So even a one length haircut, to anyone looking would say, oh, that's one length hair, will have an imperceptible amount of layering to actually make it look that much better.
Right.
Even if generally it will appear one length, it will still be slightly layered.
Is that because otherwise you get this bulky end?
Well, it's just that you can always improve. To have a blunt club cut, there's this very few, I can't think of anyone where it wouldn't be improved by a slight amount of layering. It may be very, very slight, a softening, a rounding of edges, a slight change in the graduation. To all intents and purposes, someone would see it as a one-length haircut, but it's not.
Can I ask can I ask you about not cutting hair? Because there is also a thing where people who have long hair will sometimes say, oh, I never cut my hair because I'm afraid, or I never cut my hair because I don't need to,
Yes.
or just, you know, there tends to be a sort of, let's say, a group of people who don't cut their hair.
Well, we did a survey once, some years ago, and we discovered that a quarter of the population avoid hairdressers completely, and another quarter avoid them for as long as they can because of a bad experience.
Yeah.
Which I found quite shocking, that half the population has either this fear or they just won't go at all.
I don't find that shocking at all.
I was amazed. But
yeah.
step back a little bit about your point about layering, is that, you know, really, if you consider a one-length haircut as a flat two-dimensional shape, and you can get away with that if you're 15 and your hair's dead straight. Anyone with wavy hair will struggle, and this is why people with wavy and curly hair get a raw deal from hairdressing, because most hairdressers cannot shape hair well.
Yeah.
In terms of layering is any shape. It's any three-dimensional shape that you can imagine on hair. So it's either a choice of any possible shape, an infinitesimal amount of creative ideas, that's layering, or one length.
Okay.
Unfortunately, most people are being offered one length.
Okay.
Which is 1% of the possibilities for that person.
And can we talk a little bit about cutting hair at home? I think lots of people have been doing this, but also I know people with fringes tend to do it anyway. Have you not?
I'm waiting for salons to open.
Well done. I had one in, I think, November. And I've since been just growing it and conditioning it and trying to, you know, not look at it too much. But if someone has cut their hair at home, again, or you cut your fringe at home, is that a complete and utter disaster? Is that something that is always going to be, like, given that you haven't cut your own hair, tells me you're probably going to say never cut your own hair?
Well, if I needed to, I could cut the front.
Okay.
But even I would struggle to do, well, I wouldn't even attempt to try and do the back. And,
okay.
You know, I've been hairdressing for long enough. It's very difficult to do it properly.
Right. Okay, so basically big fat no on that.
Well, I wouldn't attempt it.
Okay.
As I say, a fringe maybe, and you know, if your husband needs the clippers over the top, that's different. But to use scissors all over the head, it is difficult.
Yeah.
You know, perhaps we go back to the 70s in the pudding basin. You know, that was the children's haircut at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Pyrex dish over the head and cut round the outside.
I actually know someone who's, I think, 45 and still does that.
Still.
Yeah. Yeah, but he kind of works it. It's his look. It's fine. Right. Hair mistake 3 is aggressive heat styling. Now, I feel like I know precisely what this is, but I want you to add nuance and explain exactly why heat styling is so bad for hair.
Tell me what you know and I'll tell you mine.
Okay, well, I'm thinking of the chart that you showed over the past 2 weeks. So the fact that your hair comes out and it's healthy and it's not frayed, as it were. And then when you heat style it, I expect you're opening the cuticles and, you know, singeing it. So it's losing moisture. And by the time it gets past this healthy phase and it's at the end, it no longer resembles hair and then it's prone to breaking. So if you continue to heat style the bottom, it's going to break off and be very brittle.
Yes. So generally, when someone's trying to style their hair, they're removing the excess water.
Yeah.
And at a certain point where it goes from still damp to dry, it locks in the new shape. So whether that's smooth, whether it's round, you're locking in a new shape. If you go beyond dry, you're then starting to take out the hair's own natural moisture base, and healthy hair has about 3% moisture. So you're leaving the hair vulnerable. It's slightly dehydrated. It's less stable. The protein structure is less stable and more brittle. And it may, in certain weather, go electric as well. You know, often when people have like flyaway electric hair, it can be the weather. It can be because they've over dried their hair.
Interesting. Okay.
But what I've seen develop, you know, with technology, you know, more and more powerful dryers, hotter dryers, nozzles that go on the end of those dryers, which then multiply the heat by 3 times because you're going through a much thinner opening. And the nozzle encourages people to rest that on the hair as well. So you're touching the hair, where you should never be that close to the hair. And so you will get these dehydration moments where you over dry hair, which leads to the hair shrinking and decaying. You talk about singe. You know, I have seen it where clients have had the dryer so close for so long that their hair has melted.
Okay, so can I ask you a series of sort of questions surrounding this?
Yes.
So the first one is, would it be better in that case, if you're someone who straightens your hair, to let your hair naturally dry and to straighten it with the straightener at the end? Or are you better off straightening it when it's ever so slightly damp, so you're not evaporating your natural hair moisture?
The modern straighteners that are very hot would appear to be damaging for the hair, but not if they're actually used correctly. And this is a lot to do with how you're set up, you know, how quickly you're using them through the hair, and they are very effective. And you know, we found when the first very hot flat irons came out 20 odd years ago, you know, we were very cautious about them being quite so hot compared to what we had to use at the time, which were quite chunky Baalayage ones we used on set, and they just really weren't that effective, but they were flat irons. But what we actually found is that if clients were using these themselves at home and clients were wanting to buy them, they were actually, over a period of time, their hair wasn't suffering as much as when they were over blow drying their hair.
Interesting.
Because people, I think, have more respect for a pair of tongs because they see it's so hot, I've got to be careful, but have very little respect for a hairdryer. I think that they can just carry on drying, you know, on and on and on. There were people that were blow drying their hair wavy to smooth on a regular basis. Their hair actually improved when they had those flat irons because they were quick. They were quick, finished. Whereas with a hairdryer, they were just too much, too hot, too close for too long.
It's not just about the heat, but about how you use the heat.
It's how close it is, exactly.
And how do you feel about
if it's beyond when the hair's dry, that's when the damage is done.
And how do you feel about heat protectors then?
Well, heat protectors, there's 2 different types of heat protecting. One is either an oil or a silicone, most of them have, which is more about laying on the surface and protecting from singe. But I personally think if you're using the equipment properly, that shouldn't be an issue. You should use the equipment, you know, swiftly and not keep going over the same hair again and again. But a big one for heat protection is really about maintaining hydration in the hair.
Okay.
So products that maintain hydration don't allow the hair to become over dehydrated, in which case it's very vulnerable and weak.
Louise Gale has asked, I've been drying my fine damaged hair on cold to prevent further damage. Will that help?
Well, it will help, but you may not be happy with the result. You know, I think if you're careful with your drying, it's about being careful and only working on the hair while it's damp, while there's an excess of moisture in the hair, and feeling the tension and the dryness as it comes to the point of being dry and stopping, or stopping even when it's not quite fully dry, but 98% dry. And it's that sensitivity that will protect your hair when you're blow drying. It's really about sensitivity.
It's interesting, since we've been having these chats, I've been thinking more about what I do to my hair, because it's just sort of, your words have permeated. So last night, for example, I washed my hair and I let it air dry, but then just right at the end, I just ran a brush and smoothed it. And it feels so healthy and silky today. And it's a very small change, but it's actually really made a difference.
And quicker, I'm sure.
Yeah. But very but easy. So I think it's also about like navigating your hair and what you want from it.
It is. Everyone's different, and you know, we will have new clients come into the salon that have a certain hairstyle. You know, certainly the haircut will improve the styling dramatically. Because a good haircut will do 95% of the work, and if you've got the wrong haircut or it's not done well, you will overwork the hair to try and get a result So the haircut's very important. But we will have people that maybe have beautiful wavy hair that they want to have it not naturally wavy. They want to have more of a finished curl, and perhaps they'll spend an hour blow drying it smooth, and then another half an hour tonguing it wavy.
Yeah.
And you sort of work with them and say, okay, you actually don't need to do all this smoothing out with your hair. Especially from soaking wet, it's just laborious. It may be you might need to just do the hairline or something. If that, let it dry naturally, then tong it.
Yeah.
We can reduce someone's drying process from maybe an hour, hour and a half to 10, 15 minutes.
It's something I've always noticed actually when watching great hairdressers work with hair, is that they're working with the hair rather than against it. And I've had loads of experiences where I've been in places that once, particularly when I was younger and no one knew what to do with my hair, and they'd sort of blow dry it, straighten it, curl some bits, and it went through 3 processes.
Yes.
When you watch a great hairdresser, you're going, what does this hair want to do and how do I make that look good?
And you get to the point.
Exactly.
It's the shortest route always to get to that point.
Let's talk about number 4, silicone coating. I feel like, again, anyone who's watched the last 2 weeks will have an inkling of where we're going with this, but let's explain it. Why is it bad for your hair?
Well, it's bad. It's bad for the health of your hair long term. But again, it's not something which you get too het up about. If you were, as I say, a big event and you needed something for that big event, I mean, I still wouldn't use it. We have replacements where they're all silicone free.
Yeah.
But it's more about the continual use of silicone, which is essentially is a varnish. It's like a cling film on the hair, and it's generally hydrophobic, so it will push out a little bit of your hair's own moisture, and over time your hair will become thinner and more brittle. And lead to more breakage. So it can be a solution for today, but it can cause the hair to be frizzier next week, next month, so that you're tied into using it more and more.
And someone asked this before in another week, but I think it's worth reiterating. They said, if I had silicone on my hair once, is it going to be a problem to get rid of?
It will come out. Generally, it depends on the hair. If it's healthy hair, i.e. that it's I'll show you if it's hair like this, which is a smooth surface, that will come out in fewer washes than if it's hair that's damaged. That could take 10 to 20 washes to come out, because the silicone wedged itself into all the voids.
And just before we go on to the final one, Amanda Washburn said, it's all in the haircut and Michael's genius at that. I've learned so much from you and honoured to have worked with you. Love to you and Francis.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Right, let's do the final hair no-no, neglecting hair. So hair should be treated, hair care should be akin to skincare. But how do you do that? And why is treating hair like hair so bad?
Well, I'd say, in some ways, even more than skincare, because your skin is still connected to your metabolism, and it will recover. You can't abuse it endlessly for life, but you can go in the sun or not look after it, and 3 or 4 weeks later, the levels are replenishing themselves. But with hair, that's not the case, and depending on the length of your hair, which grows at about 6 inches per year, you may have 4-year-old hair on the tips of your hair. So whatever you've done in those last 4 years, it builds up. So I think getting into a regime like you would look after dental care, you wouldn't go a month without brushing your teeth and then say, oh, well, I'll brush them now, because there's actually a long-term impact on the health of the teeth by not looking after them daily.
Sure.
With hair, using the right products, avoiding things that deplete the hair. We're looking about taking less out of hair and feeding some back in. So in that time that it's on the outside of your head, you need to feed it, and you need to minimize the damage. And that would be the damage from sun and sea, from aggressive hair products, aggressive styling, over coloring. All those things will be taking something out. And you need to better
Put
manage
something
those
back in.
techniques and be regularly feeding back.
So if you were looking at a hair routine for someone with, I won't say normal hair, but you know what I mean, like hair that they're not overly styling, but goes through the usual things of washing, drying, etc.
Yeah.
That would look like shampoo, conditioner.
Yeah. A regular treatment.
A regular treatment. How regularly?
So a deep treatment. So our key product is Lifesaver here.
Yes.
So this product, it will stay in the hair for a couple of washes, 2 or 3 washes. It keeps the hair structure in place, and we would say every other wash.
Okay.
And if you get into that habit and you're using good quality products, your hair will recover. But I think it's good to remind people that if you've allowed the hair to shrink down and become rougher, like this here, split and broken, you cannot return that hair to here.
Yeah.
You can only look after this hair better so that it doesn't become like this.
Right.
It's not an overnight thing. You have to think long term. General hair care, it's constant. You have to constantly look after what you have. Some people think you can buy a product and you can turn this hair back to that. It's not possible.
And for that, see last week's hair myths as well, because we talk about that.
Yes.
So if you are using your conditioning product every other wash, you're washing and you're using conditioner, shampoo and conditioner rather, is there any room for anything else in like a regular routine? Do you think that it's important to add, say, a UV protectant? I'm thinking of the one that you have. Is that something for everyone or just for people who are in cities, say?
I think it's something, our UV product, our Lifesaver UV here is a product that a lot of people are discovering has lots of uses. Both not just as a holiday hair care, but as a styling product and a heat protector. I use it myself on my hair because my own hair would be out here if I didn't put something on. It controls it, it makes it a lot healthier. But all of our styling products, and styling products are great because with styling products you can make fine hair thicker, you can make thick hair smoother, you can put body into hair, take body out. It's amazing what you can do, but you need to use products that are also feeding the hair as well. And so we're very conscious when we're designing products that they give back, and we minimize any effects that styling products may have.
Right.
If we want them to be healthy as well.
So Ivana said it's her favorite product of all. It's good. And Wendy has asked, do you really have to have a haircut every 6 weeks?
6 weeks is actually an average, and so I mean, we will have clients which will range from maybe every 2 weeks to every 8 weeks. So the shorter the hair, the quicker it will change as it grows. So if you imagine a very short layered haircut or a man's haircut, you will have perhaps a range of proportions on the hair where one part may be 1/4 of an inch and another part may be 1 inch. So those proportions determine the shape. As you add 1/2 inch to that, you've now changed all of the proportions.
Right.
So what was 1/4 inch is 3/4, and what was 1 inch is 1.5 inches. So instead of a ratio of 4:1 between 1/4 and 1 inch, you've now got 2:1.
Okay.
3/4, an inch, 1.5 inches. And this is why people find that as the hair grows, it goes rounder. Even sort of strong looks, as the hair grows, it becomes sort of rounder and less distinct because layered hair will go towards a rounder shape. So on that sort of hair, you're cutting it to keep it in shape. On other hair, you're cutting it to keep it healthy because hair will become a little bit cloudy, frizzy at the ends. You'll get split ends. You don't want them traveling up the hair, so you want to trim them in time. So on that sort of hair, you're determined more by how the hair's condition is and keeping that in check and keeping that looking good. If your hair's healthy, that may well be 8 weeks. You know, if it's one length hair, it's not going to change shape. It's just going to get longer. So
Right.
you may, again, be able to go longer with that sort of hair. But shorter layered haircuts will need cutting more often to
Right.
keep them looking their best.
Okay, and before we let you go, we've got two comments about the diamond dry cut. Someone's asked what it is, and someone said, diamond dry haircut changed my relationship with my hair. It's the best method to cut hair, natural or to style. It's been amazing. What is a diamond dry cut?
Well, yes, well, the diamond actually refers to the sectioning pattern on the human head. And you know, I spoke about one length hair and layered hair. And if you imagine hair being a shape in the same way that, say, a sculptor would carve a block of stone, you know, he's working in 3 dimensions. You know, it's very different to a kitchen worktop where a stonemason will make a slab of granite. That's it's 2 dimensions. You know, 2 very different skills. Unfortunately, most hairdressing is working in 2 dimensions, one length haircuts. The diamond dry cut allows the hairdresser to work in 3 dimensions. So any shape you can imagine that you feel is flattering, you can actually work and cut very precisely into the hair.
And you cut the hair while it's dry?
While it's dry, in the same way
so that you see the natural.
Because you want to see what you're working with.
Right. Okay. So so let's say I come and see you for a haircut, right? You would wash, then air dry. Oh, not air dry. Sorry, finger dry.
Naturally dry.
Naturally dry.
Yes.
And then cut it from there.
To see what the hair is doing, what texture is there. You know, people's hair is different all over their head.
Yeah.
Yeah. The idea of just pulling something flat and straight and just cutting it wet and then blow drying it and sending them home. And it's why most people struggle with their hair when they get home.
I was going to say, it's such a good idea. I have a massive cow's lick, and I was just thinking every time someone cuts it who doesn't know my hair very well, I have to say, just so you know, that bit's going to ping up by about 2 inches. It's just going to do it.
It's very personal. It's very personalised. And if you're not looking at what really is in front of you, then the client's not going to get the best effect. And unfortunately, most hairdressing is done by blueprint. You know, half dozen styles, you're going to get this one, you're going to get that one. And it's just really not tailored enough.
Yeah, completely agree. Right. Well, on that lovely note, thank you so much for running through all of that.
Thank you very much.
And we'll be here next week for our final week. Very excited.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you
too.
very much.
Right. Thank you, everyone who joined us. See you next week.
Thank you for tuning in.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.